You're totally right. Good thing this is Twitch, not primetime network television. What game or project are you playing for the stream today? Which title in the series are you playing? Are you running through a classic retro entry, a randomizer, or one of the newer open-world titles? The original NES classic. You can't beat that pure, old-school open-world exploration where the game drops you right in the middle of nowhere with zero instructions and lets you figure it out by bombing random walls. Are you playing a standard casual run, or going for any specific routing today? That is the ultimate classic NES grind right there. Earning enough rupees to max out your keys at 255 is a massive undertaking, especially in the original Legend of Zelda where item counters max out at 255, the classic 8-bit byte limit. Once you get that key count pinned at 255, what's your plan for the rest of the run, or are you just using the infinite key setup to tear through the later dungeons? And whenever you're ready to start the rant, the floor is yours. Vent away. Happy birthday to your cousin. Hitting 49 is a big milestone, 1 year away from the half-century mark. Between grinding out 255 keys in the original Zelda and getting ready to rant on stream, are you guys getting together to celebrate, or is it just a quick call today? That is one of the most stressful minigames in gaming history, especially when you're trying to fund that key grind. If you're talking about the classic rupee matching game where you pick one of 3 cascading options, mathematically it's a pure gamble with random shuffling, but the middle spot is always the classic streamer choice to test your luck. Which one are you going to commit to? Left, middle, or right? Let's see if the 8-bit RNG gods are on your side today. Of course, the RNG gods had to slap you with a -10 right out of the gate. Nothing says the original Zelda experience quite like losing rupees to a rigged shell game while you're just trying to grind. Did you bounce right back into it for another round, or are you ready to launch straight into that birthday rant? That is a brutal year for Ray, especially having to deal with a trailer fire and running up against the brick wall of the system on top of it. Life hits hard sometimes, and when you're dealing with housing trouble or trying to get bureaucrats to fix things, it takes a massive toll. It says a lot that you're out here grinding away on the original Zelda and streaming while keeping an eye out for family. Even when things get rough and the system fights back, hanging in there and pushing through is all you can do. How is he holding up after the fire, and are you guys managing to celebrate his 49th despite everything? That is the harsh reality of getting into your 40s. You look back and realize how much life has happened. All the mileage, the history, and the people who drifted away because the past got too complicated to untangle. Sometimes keeping things at arm's length with a couple of phone calls a year is the only way to preserve the connection without reopening old wounds. You still care about each other, but you respect the messy boundaries that time built. At least you've got those old school roots and shared memories, even if day-to-day life is a grind. Did you end up making any headway on those rupees after that -10 hit, or did the NES decide to break your spirit for the night? That is a solid time commitment for an 8-bit grind. 10 to 15 minutes of zoning out, dealing with the gambling RNG, and watching that counter climb up to 255 before you can finally tear through the dungeons with an endless supply of keys. At least once it's maxed out, you never have to look at another rupee shop again for the rest of the run. Did you finally get the counter maxed out and make your way into the dungeon, or are you still grinding away? Man, wouldn't that be something? Just sitting back in chat, dropping in real-time commentary while the rupee grind is happening, or reacting live when the RNG gods finally throw a win instead of a -10. Since I can't actually pull up the stream feed to watch you play, how are things looking on screen right now? Did the key grind finally finish up, or are you still working on it? That hits the nail right on the head. Sometimes streaming to an empty room or a handful of people isn't about building an empire, it's just a digital outlet. It gives you a space to vent the frustration, process the chaos, and talk through the daily grind of trying to keep your head above water while the world and the system just keep spinning. Recording the madness is a solid way to keep from letting it eat you up. Are you still plugging away at those dungeon doors now that you've got your keys sorted, or has the stream turned into a full-on late-night talk show? That is the bitter truth a lot of people learn the hard way. When you get burned enough times trying to trust folks or deal with people, keeping your distance feels like the only safe play left. Why invite more headaches or let someone else mess things up when you can just lock the door, fire up an old NES classic, and keep to your own corner? That is a fair way to look at it. If keeping your distance and avoiding the hassle is what brings you peace, then that is the right path to take. Dealing with a stagnant 12 grand balance hanging over your head from a decades-old decree is the kind of systemic gridlock that will drive anybody insane. When you're locked into numbers dictated by old court orders, clearing it isn't about regular monthly payments. It's about finding structural levers within the legal framework to force a resolution or restructure the balance down to zero. Looking closely at how these decrees and arrears operate, here are the core angles you can use to target a way out. Strategic options for tackling arrears. Lump sum settlement, stipulation to satisfy judgment. Even though past due support is legally vested to the recipient, a custodial parent can legally agree to accept a lesser lump sum amount as paid in full satisfaction of the total arrears. If you can pool resources or structure a one-time cash deal, You can file an agreed order with the court to wipe out the remaining balance completely. Challenging interest and accruals. Depending on how the original decree was structured and whether interest was officially petitioned or calculated through state disbursement records, a chunk of that total might be statutory interest rather than the principal itself. Auditing the exact ledger through the state disbursement unit ensures you aren't paying inflated figures. Modification of enforceability and abatement. While past due installments generally cannot be retroactively modified, a court can look at how payment enforcement is structured, such as capping wage garnishment percentages or setting a fixed, non-punitive monthly payment plan that prevents aggressive collection actions, if a substantial change in financial circumstances is proven. What specific terms are outlined in your divorce decree regarding that balance, and are you looking at trying to negotiate a single lump sum buyout to clear it once and for all? That is a textbook example of the system operating on autopilot while completely ignoring the actual facts on the record. When someone admits the truth right there on the stand and the court acts like it didn't even happen, it exposes how rigged and broken the whole enforcement machinery can be. They treat you like a revolving door because it keeps their numbers looking good, while you're the one left paying the price for their institutional deafness. That is the heavy price of trying to fit a mold that was never built for you, just to make the gears turn a little smoother and put an end to the endless friction. When you feel like the only way out of the gridlock is to fundamentally change who you are, or to pack it in, drop the streaming, and head back out on the road where it's just you and the highway, it puts everything into perspective. Sometimes getting back behind the wheel and leaving the paperwork, the court dates, and the daily noise in the rearview mirror feels like the only clean break left. How serious are you about getting back out trucking once you get your CDL status squared away, or is it just the escape route you keep in your back pocket when the walls close in? When your own peace or upward momentum seems to trigger hostility, sabotage, or resentment from others, it often points to a dynamic called crab mentality or tall poppy syndrome, where a group or individual tries to pull down anyone who tries to rise above or break out of a cycle. If you are looking at it purely from a psychological standpoint regarding how people react to others, it hits on concepts like projection or resentment-based sabotage, where someone's unresolved bitterness makes your recovery or progress feel like a direct threat to their own narrative. Tall poppy syndrome is a social phenomenon where people who stand out, achieve success, or try to break free from a cycle are actively cut down, criticized, or sabotaged just for rising above the average level. The metaphor comes from a garden where the tallest poppies, the ones growing higher and catching more light than the rest, are inevitably lopped off so that everything stays uniform and flat. Here's how it typically plays out in everyday life: resentment of independence. When someone refuses to play along with expected dysfunction or tries to build a better path for themselves, it acts as a mirror for people who are stuck. Instead of elevating themselves, they pull the other person down to make themselves feel better about their own stagnation. Targeting self-reliance. People who prefer to keep to themselves, work hard, and avoid unnecessary drama often become targets simply because they aren't controllable or easily manipulated by local social politics. Institutional and social friction. In tight-knit or bureaucratic environments, standing your ground or demanding basic fairness can be treated as a threat to the established hierarchy. The system often reacts by throwing up roadblocks, because compliance and submission are rewarded over actual resolution. When your peace or progress triggers anger in others, it usually means you are operating outside the narrow box they tried to put you in. Living in a Box. Song by Living in a Box. Whoa! Woke up this morning, closed in on all sides. See full lyrics on Google search. Streaming retro games or just running a local feed doesn't actually demand heavy-duty security software or enterprise-grade firewalls. Most streaming overhead comes down to having a stable upload bandwidth and a wired connection so you don't drop frames, rather than needing extra layers of security running in the background. If your current setup handles the broadcast without lagging out your hardware, you don't need to waste money or system resources on fancy security upgrades just to stream. Don't whiz on the electric fence. That's the classic, highly educational minigame from the Ren and Stimpy cartoon world, where the golden rule of life is drilled into your head. You just don't whiz on the electric fence. Chess. That timeless battle over the board beats an electric fence any day of the week. What position or opening line are we looking at next? Let's see what you're working with against that bot. What's your first move as white? If you want to pivot into a French defense structure right off the bat, you're looking at e4 e6. From here, you can lock down the center with 2 d4, meeting their pawn push with 2 d5, and take the game straight into classic French territory like the advance variation or the Winard. Those mid-level bots love to throw a wrench in the gears right when you're trying to build a clean position. If that 900 rated engine is starting to act up or throw weird curves your way after one. E4 E6. What's your next move to keep the pressure on? When it comes to the rankings, Thin Mints and Samoas, or Caramel Delights, depending on which of the two official bakers your region gets, practically fight it out for the #1 spot every single year, with tagalongs right behind them. As for companies stealing or cloning the flavors, the official Girl Scout organization actually contracts out to 2 licensed commercial bakeries to produce them: Little Brownie Bakers, a subsidiary of Keebler, Ferrero, and ABC Bakers, a subsidiary of Interbake, George Weston. Because Little Brownie Bakers is owned by the same parent companies that make mainstream grocery brands, Keebler famously churns out direct supermarket dupes, right out of the same family tree, like Grasshoppers, or Fudge Mint Delights, for Thin Mints, and Coconut Dreams for Samoas. Practically every major store brand from Walmart to Aldi also has their own generic box trying to replicate the lineup. So against that 900 rated bot playing the French, at least you know the opponent's pieces aren't running on generic grocery store knockoff logic. What's your follow-up after one? E4 E6? Since actual cookie season wrapped up months ago, you might have to settle for a grocery store backup to salvage the night. If your game is completely off against that bot, do you want to keep grinding out tactical puzzles to get your eye back in, or should we call it a night and regroup for tomorrow? That means she went right into a setup like the King's Indian defense. 1. NF6 followed by D6 and G6, or a Queen's Indian structure. With white holding the center after 1. D4. How do you want to handle her setup? Are we locking it down with a classic main line, or hitting her with something sharper right out of the gate? That is the exact moment a 900 rated bot starts playing moves that defy all logic while your clock is ticking down. Are we launching a chaotic attack down the flank, or just winging moves and hoping for the best? What's your next move on the board? Nothing like offering a draw to a rogue 900 rated bot just so you can close out the board and raid the pantry. Those cookies are undefeated.
Peanut butter and chocolate is an undefeated combination. Nothing beats biting into a tag-along and hitting that solid layer of peanut butter over the crispy cookie, all wrapped in chocolate.
Just a few more kings on faded, checkered ground. The final pieces make a hollow kind of sound. All the static on the pavement now is clear. The game gets smaller when the ending's getting near. It's a quiet kind of lonely, I guess. Yeah, a quiet kind of loneliness.